Uh, Thank you, Viboli, for that. And I know this is a subject of great interest, especially in context of our next panel discussion, which is on Think Local. And for too long, we've just looked at traditional kinds of grain, etc., for making brews, spirits, and wines in India. There's an increasing trend towards making distillates and brews, as well as wines with local grains like millets, ragi, chiku in the case of wine, for example. To look at this particular trend, we have as our moderator Sibi Venkataraju from Toit. I'd like to invite Sibi on stage. And Sibi will be joined in this discussion with Hansel Vaz, the founder of Cazulo Feni from Goa. Welcome, Sibi. We've got Hansel from Cazulo Feni in Goa. We've got Priyanka Save, the co-founder of Zill Wines. Hansel is missing in action. We'll try and track him down. And Khalil Bachooali, the co-founder and distiller for Adventurist Spirits, makers of Tamras Gin. Welcome, Khalil. And Ms.Charnelle Martins, the distilling head for Stranger and Sons. I'll just track down Hansel and be with you all in a minute.
Okay, everyone's here. We had two more panelists who, unfortunately, for personal reasons, had to drop out. So just kind of segueing from not the previous talk, but the panel before that, where Himanshu from Paul John Distilleries talked about the Indian single malts, like the categorization of Indian single malts. And very broadly, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at a brand of Indian alcoholic beverages, either beverages that were traditionally part of Indian culture, like the Feni, probably the only real traditional beverage that's out, has some standing in the market today. And global beverages like whiskey and gin and beer that can get an Indian identity. So that we have a range of Indian alcoholic beverages. So in our panel, we have Hansel, who's from Cazulo Feni. One of the foremost Feni makers in India. Their family has been doing this for a long time. He's got one of the most exciting alcohol-related experience programs in Goa. We also from Goa, two more panelists. One, Charnelle, from Stranger and Sons, who's the head distiller at Stranger and Sons. She used to work at Diageo before, innovating in the innovation team, and then moved to Stranger and Sons. We have Khalil, who has a very versatile background from filmmaking and ad films, who's now, after 2-3 years of studying, has gotten into making gin in Goa, a gin called Tamras, which should soon be available in Bangalore as well, which is now in Bombay and Pune. Bombay, Pune, and Goa, of course. So yeah, three panelists from Goa, which is like right now the most exciting sort of craft beverage center of India, because it's so easy to do anything alcoholic in Goa. And we have Priyanka from the upcoming craft center of India called Bordi in Maharashtra. Which is like supposed to be some beautiful hillside by the Arabian Sea. So Priyanka is from Zill Wines. She explores making wines from all kinds of fruits that are native to India. So yeah, we have a wide range of panelists who, and fundamentally we're going to talk about beverages, both traditional to India, which unfortunately, thanks to the colonial intervention we had and the push for the so-called Indian-made foreign liquor category, has kept some of our local traditional beverages out, which of course, use primarily native ingredients. And then we have the IMFL category, in foreign beverages which are made locally, and whether we can have Indian ingredients as a dominant ingredient, so that we can have categories like the Indian single malt whiskey or Japanese whiskey or rye whiskey, and things like that. So I'll start off with a question to Hansel because um, in a segment which unfortunately, as I said earlier, India has ignored traditional beverages to the point where we even banned arrack in some states. Um, the Feni is probably the only thing that's in our minds today, which has succeeded in kind of breaking through and having some reasonable position in like the alcoholic segment. Is there a lesson for some of whatever else we are trying to do for Indian sort of beverages that can be, uh, specific to the country?
It's quite interesting. I believe Feni is one of the original Make in India stories. And why we like to talk about the British and their laws and stuff. We were in Goa never under the British, we were under the Portuguese. And in 1961, ironically, when India came into Goa, the same mentality persisted. So rather than being inclusive, Feni got categorized as country liquor and we were left out. And so it's been an uphill battle to try and get in. And I think after so many years of actually working in this industry, we sometimes wonder, do we really want to get in? Do we really want to be able to satiate the thirst of the entire country? Because Goa being a small place, we've got a GI, we got recognition. And so would we really want to actually mass produce a product that for centuries has been made in very small batches? And mind you, when I talk about centuries, the first recorded mention of Feni was in 1584. So it's a really old spirit and we still produce it that way. I think the lesson for every other indigenous spirit who's trying to come on, break out of this mold, I think it's interesting that they have to really be themselves. The biggest mistake every brand makes or every category makes is they think they know whiskey, they know the rules of vodka, they think they can play the game like gin, and then they try and use those rules to play their game. And that's never going to work. That's one of the first important lessons for every indigenous spirit. The second most important lesson is you need to have someone from your own community to evangelize that spirit. You cannot have someone else deciding and pontificating what is good for those people and that community and that drink or how it should be made. And I think that's very important. And so as a small Feni association, and we banded ourselves, we didn't have an association before, but we kind of got recognition like the GI. We also started lobbying with the government. We also started being spokespersons for the government. And then we ourselves started making our own brands. So it's very interesting that, you got to take ownership of your own product if you really want to go forward. And I think for anybody else who has to actually do that, that is probably the way.
One of the big challenges of using local ingredients, so local producer, local beverages, is breaking this perception that local is cheap because, it was cheap. And how did Feni break that perception? Rather than seeming like as you said, it was designated as country-made liquor.
So it's interesting, actually, put a very good question because, we never, unlike another spirit which is made in central India where they classify this as an Adivasi spirit, or a lot of the spirits in northeastern are called the tribal spirits. In Goa, Feni never had that categorization. We never called it a tribal spirit or local spirit. We just called it our spirit. So you could be upper class, you could be lower class, you could be any class. You drank Feni. And so the ownership, that ownership and the communication that came out was very different. We communicated a language that everyone understood. And I think more important, what everyone should realize is, I was invited to understand the Mahua industry and if I could help them. And I was very interested. It was totally off the record. I went there just as an observer. And I found something very interesting. I saw the government officials and I saw the private institute who was actually trying to help them. They were almost trying to help like the colonial savages. We're trying to help them and make them better, take them up, industrialize them, make them better. And I was appalled. I was appalled because, again, this whole colonial mindset is still prevalent in India. We are trying to upgrade them. Now, where Feni was different was when I went and spoke to the Commissioner of Excise, when I spoke to the government, when I spoke to people, I didn't speak as a person lower asking for help. I spoke face to face, I spoke man to man, I spoke with conviction, with a vision. And I think that's what all of us did in the Feni industry. We did not cow down, we did not bend down. And I think the single biggest thing is we did all this without money. We only used good books. So a lot of people say in the excise in the industry, you need a lot of grease to go do your job, but you can actually do it without anything. And I think that's the big thing which a lot of the small industries ask me, how much did you pay? And we said we didn't pay anything. If you are a reasonable person, you come with a reasonable argument, I mean, people will listen to you. But the simple biggest thing is, you need to take pride. And that's why the only person who can take pride is someone from that community. So if Mahua has to be the next big spirit, you need someone from Mahua, a tribal, to take it forward. If it's Chang, it has to be someone from there. And I think that's the way forward.
Thanks, Hansel. On that question of not seeming cheap, Priyanka, you do a lot of fruit wines, right? With chiku and star fruit. A lot of fruit wines, non-grape wines, because a lot of people make these wines at home. Again, is seen as homemade, crude, not refined. What have you all done as a brand and a company to kind of placate that perception?
My story is quite similar to what Hansel's story is. So I come from this town called as Bordi. It's a village with a population of around, 25,000 people. And we have a GI for chiku. And until I was 27-year-old, I didn't know about it. It was really sad. A place which grows, the annual daily average is about 200 tons of fruit being produced in that small place. And it's a time when I came back and I wanted to do something with the fruits because, it was selling at a very cheap price of 4 rupees and 5 rupees a kg. And people started eyeing the fruit as being cheap. So while I was working for the fruit and I happened to make an alcoholic beverage out of it, again, it was looked in a different light. I mean, when we started, there was no policy in Maharashtra, or for that matter, there was no policy in the entire country at that time. I'm talking about 2008, where you could process your own fruit. I mean, I'm a 4th generation farmer, and I cannot process my own fruit. And that was something that kind of hit me hard. I said, we produce it. You have restrictions on selling them, so why not let us work on our own product? And I think similar to what Hansel did, and we went to the government. I remember the exact number of days. So I fought for 7 years and 7 days with the government of Maharashtra single-handedly, just to make an argument, let us process our own fruits. And I think that is important. You need the conviction, and you need to, you need to go there every day because you're very sure you want to do that. I think the upliftment should be self-upliftment because I think that works the best. And once you do that, once you start holding pride in your product, everything falls in place. So a bottle of Chiku Fruzante, that's the name of our brand, kept on a shelf was, looked at a different light. And I'm glad today it looked very differently. This is my first time at Brews and Spirit, and I just walked in, I met this gentleman who happens to be the brand ambassador for Paul John, and I said, I really like Fruzante. So I think that's the affirmation that whatever we've done, the way we've handled our product, the pride we hold in our product, I think it makes you reach places. I think that's what it is about.
Right. Perfect. From making kind of local fruit dominant, and we're going to move into some of these foreign beverages like gin and beer. We make beer at Toit. We've experimented with local ingredients. I know local ingredients, we talk about, some additional ingredients like spices and fruit. But here we are talking about the dominant ingredient like grain, brewing with rice, brewing with millet, which a number of craft breweries in Bangalore have done. Khalil, you said you looked around for extra neutral spirit, which is your base product. That felt a lot more local than molasses, which was a byproduct, and barley based, which is more what we're taking from the Western countries. And you had an interesting journey in this search. Do you want to, and a journey that I don't think a lot of us are aware of. So I'd like you to kind of tell us, what you went through.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, me and my co-founder Devika, we're absolute outsiders. And the first thing we were told when we wanted to make a craft gin, and we went to Europe and we started to work at distilleries, the very first thing that was told to us was, you've got to get and start with a neutral grain spirit that is made from wheat, or if not wheat, that's made from barley. And of course we asked questions and we said, so sure, but why, And the immediate answer that came to us was, because neutral grain spirit made from wheat has the best mouthfeel. And of course when we came back, the first question that we really asked ourselves was, why cannot it be made from rice, right? And we started to do our research. Most of 2019, Devika and myself spent time going from distillery to distillery. Now, I'm talking about these huge, ugly, open air from one side distilleries with 150-foot columns, which don't make the spirit that you have in your bottles. They make neutral grain alcohol, right? Or extra neutral alcohol. And we went from wheat distillery to wheat distillery. We left out all the molasses distilleries because it was not a good neutral spirit, fundamentally because it had a really rough aftertaste. And let's face it, it's not neutral in taste and aroma. And then we chanced upon this beautiful little distillery in Punjab that was making their neutral grain spirit from basmati rice, right? And the immediate difference in taste came from the fact that rice is from India. And the fact that it is from India, there was a certain degree of extra attention that was paid to making that extra neutral alcohol, right? The other fun part of the story was that this distillery, and this was, by the way, Sibi is referring to the number of distilleries we went to. We went to 17 distilleries. And the 17th distillery was this one in Gurdaspur, where we buy our neutral grain spirit from. And they were the first out of 17 distilleries that had a sample from every single batch from the last 3.5 years. And that itself told us that, okay, we're going to get a good, consistent product from these people, right? What happened after we fell in love with their product is a different story altogether. Our first order was only 25,000 liters of neutral grain spirit, and they never came back to us. They didn't respond to us because their entire produce gets exported and bought by Pernod Ricard in Germany. So another time, another space, we'll share that story. But it made us really proud. It made us really proud and happy that we were using rice. And we didn't choose rice just for the story of it, but we chose rice because it was truly the best and most exceptional neutral grain spirit that we could find.
Is there a reason why it was difficult to find enough distilleries doing rice-based neutral alcohol?
I think but afterwards we did research. I think, look, the first and foremost reason why rice-based neutral grain spirits are the least in production in India is because it is so much more economically viable and profitable to export basmati rice. That's what a rice producer would want to do. They would want to go ahead and export that rice, right? That's the first problem. The second problem being there's too much molasses, neutral grain spirit, simply because it is a byproduct. It's already in existence, so it gets sold and it's really, really cheap, right? When it came to wheat, I think the wheat, and I would like not to be quoted on this, but I think the wheat-based neutral grain spirit is made from the absolute junk wheat that doesn't even get sold in the country, let alone be exported.
Right. I'll come back to you again on more things you do with gin. But let me, Charnelle is very quiet sitting in the corner. Gin is probably, the botanicals in gin is probably the most exciting in terms of what you can do with it, in terms of how much inspiration you can use locally. And so, you had some interesting, mix in your botanicals. So, I just wanted to share what kind of local inspirations you all have as part of your botanical mix.
So, hello. So as part of our botanical mix, I think it was very, very important from the beginning to kind of embrace local ingredients because that's what India is known for. We want to celebrate our agricultural heritage, our provenance, the local ingredients that we have here. If you look globally, the spices that are used in gin are the ones that are exported from India, be it black pepper especially. It's an Indian ingredient and no one really celebrates that. So it was important for us to kind of look at these very always used in gin ingredients but just not celebrated here in India. Another very important one we use is Gondraj lemon. It's very niche, only found in a certain state, but so beautifully aromatic. And it lends a really beautiful smell and taste to our gin, which is very recognizable and something we love. So what we do as part of our work and as part of our research, we make sure that we work with farm co-ops, with agricultural farms. So like the pepper that we do buy it from a farm that is just a few kilometers from our distillery. We love sourcing local because that way we sort of understand the ingredient as well because we work with the farmers, we work with the people that are selling it, we work with research institutes to kind of understand what are these important components that are in these botanicals that give them or make them of a certain quality. So when we are buying and we are purchasing and we are working with vendors, we understand quality, we understand their dialogue, we understand what varieties we want as well. So we also try to understand and gain knowledge ourselves from these vendors while we are buying. Besides that, I think we are constantly looking for interesting ingredients to use as part of our brands, be it especially our cocktail. Everyone's talked about how amazing Perry Road cocktail is. It is basically a very nostalgic ingredient, a very Indian ingredient that we used to make this cocktail. A very humble Peru that we elevated to a beautiful, beautiful, cocktail, which people loved. And that's where we embraced our local ingredient, our local produce to create something beautiful. And that's what makes my work as a distiller very exciting. The fact that India has so many botanicals that I can keep exploring, I can keep creating new recipes or new inspirations for us to keep giving you all something new to, drink and enjoy.
Hansel, I'll just come to you. I have a follow-up question on that. The botanicals, juniper is the main botanical in gin. There are some Indian junipers, but you also import junipers. Can you tell us why or why not the use of Indian junipers in gins?
So currently, that's the only ingredient we import. We import the juniper from Macedonia. And the reason is that the Macedonian juniper is very vibrant and very citrusy compared to Indian juniper, which is very robust, very resinous. It's quite larger than this Macedonian juniper. And in terms of a recipe that we were creating for Stranger and Sons, which is your spice-forward and citrus-forward botanical bill, the Macedonian juniper fit well in that space. So as it was more of a taste decision at that point in time that we chose one over the other. Maybe in the future we would, create another recipe with Indian juniper.
Right. Sorry, Hansel, you had something to add on the local produce.
Yes, so this is very interesting because I had been researching the use of botanicals. We've got 26 expressions of Feni. Everyone knows two Fenis, but a cashew and a coconut, but we've got 26 Fenis. And what is interesting is that everyone knows about the Columbian exchange that happened between North America and Europe. We also had the Columbian exchange between South America and Goa. So what we take as ours, like she said, the Peru, is actually originally from Mexico. The cashew, which everyone considers Goan, is actually from the Amazon. So what was interesting was, it might, when you say local, it might not really actually be local. What is I mean, is it as simple as American pie? I mean, like it's not really, it could be from anywhere. So the new world, the old world exchanged a lot of things with the new world, and it enriched India. So spices like nutmeg, spices like, there are so many things, but fruits like cashew, I mean, guava, all these things come from different parts of the world. And what was interesting, and I was researching this simply because I was trying to trace back the history of Feni. From 1510, when the first Europeans came to India, bringing these ingredients to India, what actually happened? And why did we use this ingredient? Why did Goa decide to use a cashew? What's interesting is, I went to Brazil a few years ago. Their national drink is cachaça, where they use a natural ingredient that is native to Goa called sugarcane, and they don't do anything with cashew. And in Goa, we make cashew Feni, which is a native ingredient from Mexico, and we grow sugarcane and do nothing with it except juice it. So it's very interesting, this cross culture of ingredients and how we perceived ingredients. And what I realized, and just to sum up what I realized through months and months of reading, was the boundary of expression entirely depended on the distiller's imagination and the drinker's taste palate. It really depended. If you liked it, it worked. If my imagination went as far, it would work. So interestingly, Goa uses a very interesting fruit from Africa. It's called the motomba. It's not even common in Africa anymore, but it's grown in Goa, and we distill an expression of Feni out of it. And it's so interesting because you're constantly pushing in boundaries. To be honest, from Feni's point of view, I've always been scared of gin, simply because they're always looking at new botanicals, and we as a small industry, we can always be swallowed up. Not intentionally, but just because the industry is like that. But it's something that local indigenous liquors have to always be conscious of.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There's what is local ingredients. A lot of the things that is used in our food, like asafoetida, for example, is not from India, and it is there in all of our things. So, but I think it's more about what grows abundant, what is easy to grow. You know, what kind of fits the weather, and talking about like mix of botanicals and experimentation. Khalil, you all have some. You all have explored some boundaries there with some Nilgiri tea. So do you want to tell us some of the interesting ingredients that you all use locally?
Yeah, I think, look, Tamras Indian Dry Gin is not a London Dry. And it's not a London Dry Gin primarily because when we were educating ourselves, we were making individual distillates. So we remembered exactly how they tasted. And, the problem with a London Dry is you dunk all your botanicals in there. Perfectly respectable, makes a beautiful gin. But once you've tried individual distillates, for example, an individual distillate of Nilgiri tea, or an individual distillate of fresh, whole fruit, citrus, when you've tried these, you know the kind of nose, you know the kind of palate, you know the kind of finish, you know what they bring to the table, right? And I mean, we had some crazy experiences. We wanted to distill amongst several hundred individual botanicals that we distilled. We were very keen on distilling Mosambi, which I always thought was completely an Indian citrus fruit. But Hansel pointed out a little over 6 months ago, it's actually native to Zanzibar. But now it grows only in the wild in Zanzibar, and it's properly organically farmed in India. So yeah, we distill fresh whole fruit Mosambi, we distill fresh whole fruit grapefruit, and we distill also as an individual distillate, we distill lotus seeds and lotus flowers, foraged every alternate day in Goa itself.
Right. So, moving on, there's of course a lot of potential for local ingredients. Um, use a lot of fruit. Are there challenges with the quality so that, you can have consistent, because to make good alcohol, you need consistent sort of quality. Are there challenges with getting consistent quality year on year?
So basically, like for example, when we started with Frusante, and the only way to ensure quality is getting the fruit from the right place. Just to give you an example, the Frusantes that we have, the 5 different fruits, are sourced from that particular geographical indication in the state of Maharashtra. For example, strawberry is sourced from Mahabaleshwar. Sindhudurg, we source our pineapples from, although it doesn't have a GI, but it has, the location is very similar to Vazakulam in Kerala, which grows pineapple. Similar with oranges. Now, oranges we source from Nagpur. So you'll always have these places which have, number one, your ingredient quality is retained because obviously they are known for their premium quality. And you will never fall short of raw material because you have it in abundance. So like he made a very valid point that, things that might not be native or local, but since they are grown in abundance, and it is much more, I would say, sustainable of you and sustainable of your business to pick something local because you're saving so much on the, obviously, energy part of it because you're not transporting from long distances. And secondly, you are giving a boost to the local economy by using those ingredients that are sourced from close by. So I think once you have all these things in place, your quality is taken care of, and your raw material will never fall short of raw material because you're sourcing it from the right location. So the focus that I have as a manufacturer of fruit is I will definitely pick a fruit with an arm's distance. I wouldn't go beyond that because that's not my territory. That's what I think. And that's thinking local, You have to think local and you have to pick local. And I think that is the key.
Right. Is there any challenges, any methods you'll use to overcome quality and consistency challenges? Because a lot of the ingredients you use are grown for different purposes, not specifically for what you're using it for. Is there any methods, Charnelle, any methods you all have adopted?
So what we do is we collaborate with research institutes. So we have worked briefly with the Spice Research Institute. I've spent extensive amount of time with their scientists and their researchers, understanding all our ingredients, be it pepper, nutmeg, mace, understanding what's the quality, what's the microclimate, how are they growing it, how is one pepper variety different from another pepper variety, and why we should possibly use this variety over another one. So all these minute details is not something us as distillers necessarily have knowledge, and so I always make sure we reach out to the right source, which is research institutes. We have one in Goa, which is fairly close, and that's the one I go to most of the time for most of the queries that I have. They've been very collaborative. And besides that, I think the farmers, they are the next persons that we usually reach out to in case we have for quality-related questions. And once you understand the kind of quality, and they know you're constantly going to be buying from them, so they make sure that they are giving you the kind of quality that you want at the end of the day. Because, like she said, you are supporting local businesses, they are then supporting you as well. They are also then involved in the pride of your product that you're making at the end of the day. And so it is a collaborative process. Besides that, yes, internally we have our own quality standards that we maintain for every ingredient that we purchase in.
I think we have time for, I just have one last question. And again, like what we started, this categorization of the Indian single malt whiskey. What does it take to get there? I think it's happened over time. Like tomorrow, if you have to do an Indian tropical fruit wine, or an Indian dry gin, or an Indian something gin, for it to become mainstream, for it to become a category on its own, like the London dry gin or American rye whiskey, what is it going to take? I think this is for everyone. I'll probably go in line.
So I think you know, like you said, you want a categorization. So very recently, there was London Wine Fair, and so you know there were these 10 wineries which were participating, and so instead of like you know going individual, they all like went together in a cluster, and there was like a huge stall in the middle of London Wine Fair saying Wines of India. I think it's a matter of us showing up together. I think once we start showing up together, our category is going to be visible. And you know, jo dikhta hai wo bikta hai. I mean, ultimately that's what it's going to be. The more we show up, the more we are going to get recognized, and the more we are going to be looked at as a category. Because you know, when we started Frusante, and you know, I understood that more than a brand, Frusante was to be a category. Just like you know, Bacardi Breezer. Bacardi Breezer was just a brand. Now it's a category altogether, you know, although it's a cooler or whatever you call it, but you know, whenever you walk into a restaurant and there's a person who's not very well versed with the alcohol terms or is not sure about the category, and they would always say Breezer dena, you know, and then maybe they'll pick up a Rio or they'll pick up something else which is similar to that, but it's become a category. So I think consistency and showing up is something that we all should do together. You know, if per se, if I'm a wine category or if a gin category, or whatever category could be. And I think eventually, you know, it is going to show up on its own.
Right. So the Indian single malt, there's a story why it's got its own uniqueness, right? It's the grain they use, it's the temperature conditions in the country. Is there something similar that can happen with gin? Primarily with the botanicals, I guess. That could you know lead to an Indian gin category.
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. I mean, small correction. London Dry gin you can make anywhere in the world. It's not geo-locked to London because it's a style of gin. But I think for India's gin story to really become a truly exceptional standard, I think the first thing is exactly what Priyanka said. I think we've got to get it out there, and we've got to make sure. If you go to the fundamentals of gin made all over the world, in any part of the world, has certain local ingredients that are always used, right? They become it becomes like the provenance of that particular location. And I think that as Indian gin makers and distillers, we must keep in mind. I think the second one is me calling a spade and saying, I think in order for us to really make it a successful Indian dry gin or Indian gin story, I think all of us should together push quality standards as well, right? I think Paul John and Amrut didn't just arrive there one shot.
Blue ribbon.
Well, wait, the sooner we get rid of blue ribbon, the better. But it's happening. But truly, I mean, Amrut and Paul John, I mean, they invested time, they invested a lot of energy and a lot of money that was spent, and they studied how to make a truly exceptional product, right? And I think a few of us here are wanting to take it to the global platform and hit certain quality standards so that an Indian gin can be top shelf gin, right?
Charnelle, you have something to add to that?
I think we're comparing ourselves.
They are already
at the
taking
moment.
it international.
Yes, that's what
They
I mean.
are.
So like the Indian whiskey category has been there for a really long time. And in comparison, I think the gin category, the craft gin category, at least here in India, is in its nascent stages. Like we're just a few years old at this point. And in just a few years, we still have gone globally. We have won awards. We are being recognized on the international stage. We are available globally. And so we are slowly leaving our mark, you know, globally as being an homegrown Indian gin. And this is what Indian gin is all about. So it's just a matter of time, I feel, when we will, you know, finally be recognized maybe as a category if that's what we want to do. But I'm sure we are already being recognized as a country that produces world-class gin, not just Indian whiskey anymore.
I think there's great potential with gin, especially. I think coinciding with the popularity of gin, in the market has been the emergence of some very good craft gin brands in the country. And, with, with bottles and quality that you go to a duty-free shop or even a shop, it looks like any other international gin, that established brands. So Hansel, anything, last words on, or, you've created that Indian category. Any last words on how we can all go about creating an Indian, we want to make an Indian beer. There's America has made East Coast IPAs, West Coast IPAs. There's the Belgian style beers, German. We don't have an Indian beer yet. I mean, Kingfisher is not Indian beer. But I think that's got to come more with grain and we don't have Indian hops, but it's got to be a grain forward thing. But as you own that category, Feni. Yeah, y'all don't even allow us to make a Karnataka Feni. I think that's where we all want to be.
So what's interesting is no matter what we say and what we want to do, it entirely boils down to the government. And that's what I realized right in the beginnings 9 years ago when I embarked on this whole journey. What are the 7 categories? Could there be the 7th category of spirits? We've got whiskey, vodka, gin, brandy, and could Feni be the next category? And so you have to define that process. So we have a unique style of distillation. Feni is the only spirit that distills to drinking strength. We use unique ingredients. So we had everything going for us, but when I went to the FDA manual, we didn't exist. So no matter what you want to do, the government has to define you. So you come under other countries' spirits. So the first thing you have to do if you want to be a next category, you have to, if you want to be like Frusante, you want to be a different category, you have to go to the government, lobby with them. They change every 5 years. They make an amendment every 5 years. Use all your good books, sit and explain to 25 government officials and convince them why you should be the next spirit category. Once you do that, when you convince them, then you need supporting documentation because everyone loves documentation. When you have supporting documentation, then you need scientific analysis. So once you get the scientific analysis, then you just hope and pray that it happens.
Thank you. We'll open for questions from the audience. Yes, somebody at the back. Do you have a mic? Shout. Shout it out. You look young, come on.
Khalil, this one is for you. I'm based out of Bangalore. So let's say there has to be a benchmark in the market. There has to be one person in the market who would lead the entire category. Once you said blue ribbon, right? Could that be gotten rid of? I don't think so. Possibly you're looking the gin Indian movement, right? Indian gin movement. Started in 2018. You're looking at until last year. The blue ribbon has gone from strength to strength. From 80,000 cases to 160,000 cases. And followed by your global players. Some fantastic gin that comes into India. Which has gone from 25,000 cases to 50,000 cases. And our beautiful gin culture or the gin boom of India. It's there, 60,000 cases. When we want to achieve something, a pinnacle, when we want to move as a category, right? You need to have somebody who would be holding this category for next 50 years, 60 years. Possibly, how long it would take for a gin that originates from any part of India to get into that strength. The same globally, we see many gins, right? Still, when we put, Gordon's would be the gin that's been there from 1940s till your 2005-6, holding that category for us. So when we want to do something great, I think we need few brands. I do not know, we may like, we may not like, but they need to hold the market for us, right?
Wow. Okay. Sorry, what is your name again?
I'm Asmani.
Asmine. Okay, so who's going to be that brand? And who's going to be that guy? I'm going to be that guy. No, but on a very serious note, I think Now Spirits is doing a fantastic job. Stranger and Sons is doing a fantastic job. We're just about getting started. So we're going to get there. I'll give you quick fire responses. We can also take this conversation offline. I think the second thing that you brought up, which is very pertinent, that Blue Ribbon sales are increasing. Gordon's and Tanqueray that have come into the country, their sales are increasing. That's precisely the kick in the guts that I needed. We're not selling enough. But here's the deal. We're going to get there. Because the audience is getting more and more discerning right now, right? 5 years ago, if you ask somebody, would you drink an Indian gin? They would say, no, I wouldn't. Fundamentally because they wouldn't trust an Indian spirit. They would much rather buy a bottle of Tanqueray 10 for an obnoxious price instead of trying out or at least giving a shot to an Indian craft gin. Now, that's changing in two different respects. The first respect is because of the sheer fact that there are so many fantastic, really high quality craft spirits made here in India, right? But the second reason, which nobody seems to be talking about, which is actually the wind beneath the sails of gin, is the gin consumer, the craft gin consumer wants to drink local, right? Craft gin consumers globally want to drink local, right?
Well,
And
just
to
add on, right?
answer your, okay, go ahead.
Khalil, just to add on, I think possibly this is sort of a discrimination. A craft gin drinker and a local gin drinker and a global gin drinker. No, it's got to be gin drinker as a whole. It's got to be scotch drinker as a whole. It's got to be vodka drinker as a whole. So I would say for us to speak one segment, to exclude them, I don't think so. We may not go anyway. It's got to be the one whole segment, I guess.
That's a much larger conversation of
Sorry,
craft versus
you can have a
mass.
fireside chat.
Fireside
Continue.
chat.
Any more questions? Sorry. Last question.
Hansel, this is for you. Two-pronged. One is one relates to the past, and one is probably more future relevant. Firstly, why do you think cashew has been around the world in many places? Why do you think it really began to be distilled in Goa? Was there already a strong tradition of distilling coconut or other fruits that were already available in Goa?
Yeah, so why was cashew distilled in Goa? Only in Goa until today. So it's very interesting. You cross the border into Maharashtra 100 meters and they don't know what to do. You cross to Karnataka and they don't know what to do. And despite the Portuguese having a huge empire spanning Southeast Asia, Africa and Brazil, where the cashew comes from, the cashew distillation did not travel. But we do know the answer. Coconut Feni preceded cashew Feni, and cashew Feni only co-opted the entire process. So they essentially used the same process that was used before for coconut. They just kind of copied it into cashew, and they kind of streamlined it into cashew, and cashew became a mainstream drink. Yeah.
I have another one for Hansel. The second one is, I know the entire Feni community has worked very hard to get the GI for Feni in Goa, etc. And do you think it's not in some way detrimental to also Feni being recognized, across the country or elsewhere in the world? Because if it can only ever be produced in Goa, then how are more people going to be educated about it or experiment with it or just come into contact with it?
Yeah, there are two ways. Now we've got the GI, so it's a very interesting because Goa is the smallest state in the country. So we don't produce as much cashews. Goa is the 7th smallest producer of cashew in the country. Maharashtra is the largest. So one of the options is to get cashews from Maharashtra into Goa, and that would seem very logical because they don't know what to do with cashews there. But interestingly, we cannot. One, because of regulation, because GI. Number two is because in Goa we don't pay duty on how much Feni we produce. We pay duty on the number of cashew trees are there in your property. And so if you're bringing cashews from another state into Goa, you're not paying duty. So it becomes a little dicey there. And a third and the most important thing is the harvest practice is very unique to Goa. Goa is the only place in the world where we do not pluck a cashew, we do not shake a cashew tree. The cashew tree has to get ripe, the cashew has to get ripe on the tree and fall on the ground, and only then can we pick it. And that's simply because the cashew has chemicals that are very acidic and very irritant, so we can't use that if it's raw, number one. And number two, if the cashew is picked from a tree or it's shaken from a tree, it might not be fully ripe. So if it's not fully ripe, we don't have enough sugars. So if you distill cashew from, generally that comes from Maharashtra, the taste is very different from what happens in Goa. So what's interesting is, if we want cashew to be distilled anywhere else in the world, they'll have to first learn to harvest cashews. And that comes with culture.
Great. Thank you. I think we'll end our panel discussion there. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Sibi. Thanks, Charnelle. Thanks, Hansel. Thanks, Khalil. Thanks, Priyanka. I'd like to invite DJ, the editor of Brews and Spirits, on stage to hand over a memento to the panelists.
Can I get a break?
5 minutes. Yeah, we'll get to the next panel discussion in 5 minutes' time, which Priyanka is moderating.